evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is our first preservation conversation for 2020. How exciting to kick it off with such a wonderful crowd. I'm Patricia Blick. I'm the Executive Director of the Quapaw Quarter Association. I'd like to also introduce Shelley Stormo. She's our Membership and Events Coordinator. And I'd also like to recognize several of my board members that are here tonight. Chuck Clyde is in the back. Gina Silva is right here. Just wave your hand. Ann Bryan, Ann Bella and Bryan is here too. Have I missed any of my other board members? If you are interested or curious about the QQA, feel free to reach out to any of these folks when we wrap up tonight's conversation, and they can tell you all about what we do and what we have going on. I also want to have a special thanks to the Quapaw Nation. They are actually underwriting the entire program this year, and so they are assisting us with the use of this space, the cost to use this space, and the amenities that we have available for everybody. So a big thank you to the Quapaw Nation. And also I do want to recognize Cromwell because they are subsidizing the use of this wonderful historic space. It's been recently rehabilitated. And certainly our corporate and landmark members, they're on the plaques right inside the door as you came in. So I'd like to thank them as well, and really all of the members of the QQA. And certainly if you're not a member of the QQA, I recognize many of you as members. If you're not a member, we invite you to join. You can join for as little as $35 a year, and it supports the work that we do, which is our mission is preservation of Greater Little Rock's historic places. And now I'm going to get into introduction of our speaker. And I always kind of tie back to how we got here tonight. So this is how we got here. I got a letter in May signed by Tad Bohannon offering to come and speak to our group, Quapaw Quarter Association. And he had a lot of different ideas for topics: Citizen Water Academy, Flow Innovation Lab, 2018 milestones, and it kind of goes on. And I said, so I reached out to his contact person, Mary Dyson, who was very responsive. And I said, would there be somebody, or could he do a talk about the history of public water in Central Arkansas? And I got a very, very fast affirmative reply, and quote, Tad said, yes, I can certainly talk about the history of public water supply in Central Arkansas. It is one of my favorite topics. How about that? And obviously there are many of us who are interested in public water history and infrastructure, and I think we've seen that in some of our other lectures. So let me just read his brief bio that they shared with us as we got ready for tonight's program. C. Tad Bohannon has served as Chief Executive Officer of Central Arkansas Water, the largest public drinking water system in Arkansas since 2016. CAW has operating revenues in excess of $70 million and serves over 450,000 consumers in 17 communities. Tad frequently speaks on corporate management, leadership, employee development, Arkansas history, and water law at local and national conferences. As an adjunct professor at the William H. Bowen School of Law, he taught local government and real estate transactions. Tad has degrees from Hendrix College, the Bowen School of Law, Washington University, and the University of Oxford. And finally, before I let him take over, I'll just note that it was just announced recently that he was included in the top 25 Arkansas influencers by Arkansas Money and Politics. So I feel fortunate that we have him here tonight. Thank you. Tad.
All right, so we are going to talk about the history of water in Central Arkansas. We're going to get into the politics a little bit. We're going to get into rates. We're going to get into all kinds of things. I'm probably going to skip a few slides, but don't think like you're really missing out on anything, because I won't skip any of the important ones, and we'll be here all night if I do them all. And I don't think that. But one of the things I want to point out right from the start is this is a picture of a water pipe from 1900. And this is a picture from 2017 when Central Arkansas Water laid the 2,500th mile of pipe. By the way, somewhere, I don't know where there are, but there's another piece of pipe that has 500 on it, another piece that has 1,000 on it, we'd have to go dig them all up somewhere. Somebody probably knows where they all are. But we still convey water the exact same way we conveyed it 100 years ago. Unlike many other things that have changed in how we do it, we still get water around. The only biggest difference is if you can see in this picture, this water pipe is put together like a wine barrel or a whiskey cask. It's literally wooden, held together with bands, and as long as there's water in it, it's good and sturdy, and it really works. As late as I think we dug up the last piece in about 1990. Now, it wasn't still being used, but they haven't found any in about 20 years, but they've found some. So it's been around for a while. So we'll talk about that in more in a minute. See it in the future. So I call it Water 5.0, okay? And I do that because we started with Water 1.0, and that's like when people just lived next to the river. And then we came along and we moved along. And so we have Water pre-1.0, and then we have Water 1.0, which is the Romans, and the Romans figured it out, and we do things just like the Romans. All right, centralize water, bring all the water into a central place, then push it out to other places. And we haven't changed the design of our water systems, other than we forgot about it for a couple hundred years. We haven't changed the design, but even the Romans were smart enough to figure that they needed water if they were going to have big cities. The only way you could have big cities was water. This guy, and I just put this one in because it's been in the news a lot lately, and sometimes maybe it's good for us to remember our history. Everybody's heard about the lead scare. Okay, you're good. We've dug up every service in our system. We know there are 9 lead lines. We know where they are. The owners that they serve know their houses that they are. We've been totally open with them. We're working to replace those lines, and we test their water regularly to make sure they're safe. But everything else, there's no more. All the other lead lines are gone. But way back when, in 25 BC, this early on engineer said lead pipes are unhealthy and should be avoided. Now, as we go through the history, we're going to get to a point where the Little Rock City Council actually passed an ordinance that required the use of lead lines. So sometimes we need to remember our history. There's actually good lessons there, and we ought to remember them. So then we get to 2.0, and this is where we kind of forgot what the Romans did. We call that the bucket era, and Arkansas has their own bucket era. And this is when we did great things like we put water intakes downstream from the wastewater discharges. And so, it wasn't the great era of water delivery in the world. Then we kind of moved into where people dug up, and we're going to even get in. You say, well, how is this relevant? Because we do have our own bucket era, where people went to city wells and hauled all the water to their house via bucket. Whoops. 3.0 is we actually start designing water systems and putting them into cities again. And we get to chlorine, 3.5. The biggest thing about 3.5 is in 1974 we had the Safe Water Drinking Act. And with the Safe Water Drinking Act is when it really became a regulated industry, and your water was started to be tested regularly, and it was made sure that it was really good water. 4.0 is where did all the water go? And we saw 4.0 as well. Everybody started saying, oh, you need to conserve water. Don't put in the low-flow toilets, buy low-flow washing machines and dishwashers. And I've messed up. All right, you introduced we have a commissioner here tonight, Jay Barth, and he's here with us. And I have 2 staff members with me, Chelsea and Doug, and they're for my communication, and they hate this part. What did I say? You know the little water restriction things in your shower head that make less water? Break them out. Okay? Just take them right out. All right? We have plenty of water. All right? Those newfangled washing machines that use a little bit amount of water, go find you a good old one that fills the whole tub up with water. I mean, we have plenty of water. We are not California. We are not Las Vegas. We are not Arizona. We have plenty of water supply. And in fact, in some areas of the city, we have areas where we're just dumping water on the ground because there's not enough water used. And if you look at our statistics, there's actually declining water usage in every household because, one, kids are moving out. The central area is getting to be an older, less resident per household area. But you all are buying those low-flow toilets and those things, so we're actually using less water. So that's halfway in jest, halfway. All right, but so 4.0 is where did all the water go, and then 5.0 is how are we going to do it differently, all right? And so this kind of takes us into the future a little bit about, we have areas of declining population in this state, where they built a water system for 6,000 households on it, and now they have 2,500. And if they're looking down the road, they're looking within another, they're scared to death of the next decennial census because their highway sign's going to have to be replaced, and it's going down, not up. And so how do we maintain these systems that were built for higher populations in a declining population area? So how do we rethink how water is delivered in the future? So, but this is what we're going to talk about in Central Arkansas today. All right, this is the history of Central Arkansas according to Tad. And we start in 1837, and this is the most important thing for you to remember anytime anybody's talking about water delivery in a metropolitan area. Okay? Water was delivered and is still delivered for fire protection, not for drinking water. Okay? The reason there are 12-inch mains and 16-inch mains and 8-inch mains on your street is not for drinking water or consumption purposes. If everybody just used their water for consumption purposes, we could have little 2-inch pipes, maybe 4-inch pipes every once in a while. Okay? But to get the flows that are needed for fire protection, you have to have big pipes. Okay? And that pipe has to be maintained. All right, so it was drinking water, and in fact, city ordinance was actually passed that said it is unlawful for you to take water out of a fire cistern, which is how they originally did water fire protection, and use it for any purposes other than fire protection. That's how strict they were about it. Okay, and during this early time period, drinking water came from wells and a couple of natural springs around. But nobody was really satisfied with it, and they weren't happy with it. Water came directly out of the Arkansas River, was pumped into the cisterns. And this was a history talk, so I said, okay, here's where the original cisterns were for the people that are history geeks and wanted to know where the original fire protection was. The other thing that you need to remember is the city paid for maintaining these based on an annual fee, all right? And so, for instance, the water supply company that we'll get to in a minute that would provide water, they paid, okay, we'll pay you $3.50 per fire hydrant per year. And that's how the individuals that maintain these systems made money. Okay? So, we've gone from 1837 all the way up to 1869, and the legislature finally says, cities, you can put in public water systems for drinking water purposes. For those of you, the lawyers in the room, we're a Dillon's Rule state. They can only do those things that they're authorized by the legislature to do. And in 1869, the Arkansas legislature finally told cities they could do public water supply for drinking water purposes. Little Rock jumped right on the board, and they created the first, and it was a private company, okay? You might recognize a few of the names of the people that own the company over there on the far side, include a bunch of lawyers who saw lots of money to be made in water in the future. They were sorely disappointed, but the biggest one that I recognize up there is U.M. Rose, of the Rose Law Firm. But they actually formed a company, and so here you see where they were paying, and they've gotten their money up a little bit. They would pay for 15 hydrants per mile. They'd pay $125 per hydrant per year, and then they had requirements for how those fire hydrants had to produce. They got authority to do public water system, but look at, they're all already going back to fire protection. There's nothing in there, okay? If you got hooked up to the public system, you would have paid by the size of your house and the number of bathrooms you had. So if you had a 2-room house, it was X dollars per year. If you had a 3-room house, it was another $1 per year. You had 2 bathrooms, and so your bill, nothing about consumption. It's all about just what you had, and then that's how much you pay. The problem is, they did all this and nothing got done. One of the problems was financing. They couldn't raise the capital to be able to build the infrastructure that they needed to build. The other problem was they just didn't find enough money to make it worthwhile to do it. And so even in 1874, these people gave up, and there was another entity formed called the Little Rock Artesian Water Company, and they formed, and they got a contract with the city to provide water, and there's no record of them getting anything done, and they went away. So, a lot of writing over there, but I'll just get right in. We get to 1876, and we finally start getting serious because of 2 things. Epidemics and place is burning down. Okay? And so that the fire protection was inadequate, and people were getting sick from waterborne diseases. And in fact, he put up there letter of sympathy from Cincinnati, which I just find ironic because if you all study water, you know that Cincinnati is the town where the Ohio River caught on fire, and the actual river was burning because the water quality had so much stuff in it. So, but they sent us a letter of sympathy because of our fire. So they went out and they said, okay, we'll get proposals from people to come in and do business. And they had an out-of-city place that wanted to do it. And we're going to keep coming back to this term, Reservoir Hill. Hill Road, reservoirs up there, we're going to keep coming back to that. But they wanted to buy Reservoir Hill. A Little Rock group said they want to do it, but they're just going to pump water out of the Arkansas River and deliver it without settling, purification, or clarification. The city council chose the local boys who were going to deliver the water to the houses without settling, purification, or any type of cleaning it up. Okay? So they selected the city. The city actually issued money to loan to the company to get started. Remember I told you financing, raising capital was difficult, so the city said, here local boys, we'll give you the money to get started. They laid some pipe, and you see where the pipe was kind of completed. They got the construction completed in 1878, and by the spring of 1879 they were broke. Okay, so the city was left paying back $80,000. The company went broke. All right, now J.M. Rose, sorry, that should be a U. U.M. Rose started a new company called the Little Rock Water Company, and he purchased the assets saying, okay, I'll give it a second shot at trying to create water in the city. And then, again, nothing happened. So, 1880, we get down here to Zeb Ward, all right? His name is going to come back up. He started the Home Water Company, and he's going to do a system, and he actually builds it. He actually gets it done, and he actually builds a system, and they start into business. Okay? All right, where am I? All right, so 1882, though, nobody was happy with the water quality. They said, oh, we don't like this water. All right, so they made some attempts to improve it. They did some various things. They pumped the water out of the Arkansas River. They also sunk wells where now the river Remsen and golf course is. That used to be the well field for the water company to be able to drill wells, use the natural sand and the soil from the river coming from the water through the alluvial sands, and then they would pump it out and they would bring it into the water. 1885, he purchased all the assets, but he wanted the city to pay the cost of improving the water company. And then he was bought out by a national company out of Pittsburgh, and this is where we get the Arkansas Water Company. And we actually have one of these in our office, and then this is another one. You see it's Arkansas with a W. All right? And that was Arkansas Water Company. And they actually stayed around for a while, and they actually did a good job of providing water service. There was just problems with water quality. Water quality was always an issue. If you go down, I got some pictures in, I think here someplace. And if you go down by Cajun's Wharf, you see a bunch of piers sticking up out of the ground right over the shore. That's where the intake site was. And they would pull the water out of the Arkansas River there. They would pump it up to the top of Reservoir Hill, and then it would sit in settling basins, and then it would come back down into the city by gravity, and all of the central part of the city was covered by gravity. Now again, Zeb Ward and his son owned Reservoir Hill, okay? And so they made their money even though they were out of the business now, but they leased it to the water utility as a place to have their settling basins. All right, then we get to the famous May 24th ordinance in 1887 that says all water lines should be of lead instead of iron. All right, so we kind of forgot what we knew from in the 80s, and then they started pumping water up to the river. So there was still questions about the water quality, so I find it interesting that we had a gas, water, and fire committee in the city. But we did, but they took some of the water out of the river, out of the treatment plant, and they sent it off to the Smithsonian Institute to see if it was still good water. They thought, well, we don't want the local people analyzing it. We want somebody outside and independent and maybe who knows more than us. And so they sent it up to them before they accepted the water. And they didn't like it, okay? It was still a problem. So eventually, Arkansas Water Company made some improvements. They put in sand filters, we'll talk about that in a minute, to make the water quality come up. And at some point, Mr. Ward cut a deal with Arkansas Water Company to say, I'll give you Reservoir Hill if you'll give me water for as long as I live in the city for whatever I need it for my house. I mean, he traded water service for whatever the remainder of his life was for the hill. Okay? Which could have been a lot, could not have been a lot, I don't know. All right, so, but there was also two easements. One was from the river to the top of the hill because he owned all the land that is now also like junior deputy ball fields and Cajun's Wharf and all that area. He owned all that land. And then he also gave an easement from the Reservoir Hill down to the city, which at this point was still on the other side of the Capitol. Okay, but he was set for life now for water, all the water he could drink. And so he was set to go. Why he didn't go for beer or wine, I don't know, but he went for water. And I say all this, and this is a current view. You know, this is no longer a current view of the Ozark treatment plant. For those of you that have been up there, around there, this area has been totally, we're working on redoing it. But I think the important part is to look at, these were the first two settling basins that were built in 1886. Okay? This concrete wall that held it, and we put a roof over this one, we still use it today. This one we don't use. It's the original concrete wall built in 1886. This basin here was built in 1912, and this basin over here was built in 1928. And when we had the engineers come in and say, okay, we're going to gut this plant, we're going to totally redo it, they said, do not touch that concrete. We can't pour anything like it. Okay? And it's better than anything you can get today. So just leave it alone. We have done that. Yes. We're totally redoing that plant. We've pulled out all the middle of it, but the outside walls are still there and still working just fine. So now we get to 1922. They want to raise rates. Little Rock City Council gets the authority to set the rates for them, and they want to raise rates, and the Little Rock City Council says, no, you can't raise rates. And they said, well, if you're not going to raise rates, we'll just surrender our franchise. Your people will be without water. We own all the assets. We're not giving you the assets. We're just going to stop delivering. We're just going to mothball everything and shut it down. So they finally worked out a deal with the Little Rock City Council, and this was also the very first time that we start seeing metered rates. And you have a choice. You could pay flat fee, or you could elect to have your water metered in the city. Now, a few years from now, after that, we go to the point where we say, no, everybody's going to be metered. But this was the first instance where people would say, so the people that used a lot of water went flat rate, and the people that didn't use much water went metered rate. But nevertheless, this is kind of the first time that we went to that point, and we said, everybody, you get a choice. 1927, the Arkansas River flooded, okay? And you said, big deal. Well, the problem is it messed up the intake site, raised the turbidity incredibly. The settling basins couldn't handle the turbidity, so people were turning on their faucets and getting browner water than what they were used to at the time. So there was a big uproar about water quality. And then later that year, that was at the beginning of the year, and then later that year there was a drought. And they were running short of water, and they were having to tell people, do not use your water because we don't have enough water. In fact, they had to go out and build a second intake site. Remember, this is before the dam system was all built. So they had to go build a second intake site farther into the Arkansas River so that they would so they weren't pumping out mud, they were pumping out water to be able to get any water up to the top of the hill. And then at 30 they had drought again, and then I found they keep coming back and say, well, we need to make this improvement, we need to make this improvement. And so finally the city is responsible for state oversight. Just remember that. In 1933, the city passed a resolution asking the Arkansas governor to create the Public Service Commission. They said, we don't want to keep having to control rates, we don't want to mess with it or whatever. When you kindly come up with the Public Service Commission and have them be the entity surge rate. So every time the city gets mad about what they're doing with electricity or natural gas or whatever, they can blame themselves. Okay? Because they're the ones that set it up in 1933 and said, would you please create it? They didn't call it that, but that's effectively what it became, was the Public Service Commission. And so then everything hit ahead. We're going through the end of the Depression. There's cheap money available from the federal government. And Arkansas, Little Rock goes to the Arkansas Water Company and says, we got to get out of the river. You can't keep using the river as a supply source. We're just getting Conway's and Fort Smith's, but more important, it's just bad water. Okay, it's got too much silt in it. It's got too much stuff in it. So can we find a new water source? And the Arkansas Water Company said, we are not. I mean, that's just way too much money. We're not spending it. So they talked to the federal government. The federal government back at that time was loaning out money for projects so that people could put people to work because we're coming out of the Depression. And the Fed said, okay, we'll loan you the money to build a new supply lake and buy the water system south of the river. So, I forgot to say that. At this point, there is no difference between Little Rock and North Little Rock. Okay? Even governmentally, there's differences, but it's all one pretty big water system. Water's flowing across the river. They're providing water on both sides of the river. It's one water utility on both sides of the river. So the city of Little Rock purchased all the assets south of the river. Okay, from Arkansas Water Company. And this is important. More important than some of the other things I've already said are important. They purchased all the water, all the assets south of the river, which include the water treatment plant. The only water treatment plant. From Arkansas Water Supply. And Arkansas Water Company kept all the assets on the north side of the river. So they're the ones supplying North Little Rock with water, and they don't have a water treatment plant. So part of the contract when they purchased it was that Little Rock would agree to sell water to Arkansas Water Company at 4 cents per 1,000 gallons. That's all it said. It said, we will sell you water at 4 cents per 1,000 gallons, period. Didn't say forever, didn't say for the next 10 years, didn't say subject to adjustment at the rate of inflation. It just said, we will sell you water at 4 cents per 1,000 gallons, period. But it was part of the purchase price. Okay? So this also becomes important in 2001. Okay? And we'll get to, if we get to 2001 before you all fall asleep. All right? In 2001, and they also said, look, we put in this new water system on the south side of the river, and you didn't pay 1 cent of it with sales tax. The whole cost was paid with rates. Okay? No sales tax was used. So in other words, no general funds from the city were used. It was all paid for by the ratepayers. When we get to 2001, that will become important. All right? So here we go. We're going to build Lake Winona. Lake Winona is the coolest thing you have ever seen in your life. And how it operates is even cooler. This is not Lake Winona. We'll get a picture of Lake Winona later. This is Jackson Reservoir. Lake Winona is way out in Saline County. It's 33 miles out of town. All right? The water flows from Lake Winona to the Ozark Treatment Plant on Hill Street by gravity. No pumping. Okay? So, and that's, by the way, is 12th Street, which is now Canis, where you see all that pipe cleaned up. So, it's been widened a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. So they bring it all the way into Little Rock by gravity. And so this is, for those of you, this is Highway 10, and this is Jackson Reservoir. Okay? If you're there, Reservoir Park, if you're driving down Highway 10 and you crevasse, you all may not go that far west. You all may not if you go out there, you go to Pavilion in the park, and then there's just this period of trees and fencing on the south side of the river, that was Jackson Reservoir. And Jackson Reservoir held 92 million gallons of water. And they built it at the same time they built Lake Winona. Why? Lake Winona was 33 miles out there. They didn't know if a pipe breaks sometime, what are we going to do for water while we get somebody out there to repair it? So they built Jackson Reservoir. When Jackson Reservoir was built and it held 92 million gallons of water, because it's only 3 miles from the Ozark treatment plant to Jackson Reservoir. Okay, it held about a month's worth of water. Now it holds 3 days, if we're lucky. On an average day, it holds a day and a half. Okay? But the whole purpose of Jackson Reservoir, and this tells you how far ahead they were thinking, was what if something breaks? We've got an emergency supply of water right here. Again, it's filled by gravity. For those of you that have been in Leawood, where you see great big swaths of green, that's where the pipeline's coming through, and then it turns and comes up, and where we opened a valve without closing another valve and flooded 3 houses back in the late 90s. But so anyway, that's Jackson Reservoir. They built Lake Winona, and the headlines were great. This gives you a map. Come on, our lake made a postcard. That's good, right? Lake Winona comes all the way through the city. It gives you some points of where you can think about it. It runs right under the Home Depot. Again, that's out west. Home Depot Chenal parking lot. It's right under the drive-through of the Chick-fil-A drive-through there. There's a little Regions Bank.
211 Poinsettia Drive.
There you go, and then it cuts through the city, and it comes up through the city. Basically, it's Evergreen.
Is that the pumping station right there?
That's the pumping station right there at Markham and Bowman. That's actually, there is no pumping station for the line going in. That's the pumping station to take it back out. But it comes basically down, hits, and then comes down Evergreen Drive, and then cuts across and goes up to the Hill Street, the Ozark Point. So, amazing thing, started in 1936, finished in 1938. Big newspaper heading, we have enough water for the next 75 years. Pronounced. Okay? Again, we already talked about that. It comes into Wilson Treatment Plant. This was the treatment filter gallery at the time. This one little building, as you see, it's been expanded as we needed to be able to provide more water. But that little building built in 1938 is what was built to treat the water at that point. So, just to give you a little bit of differences between today, that's my checklist for things to talk about over there. One, it's 39-inch pipe. Who makes 39-inch pipe? Nobody. It's really meter pipe. And the reason it's meter pipe is because a steel manufacturing company had built a steel pipe, a pipe machine to make new pipe that was supposed to go to Bolivia. Bolivia had a minor war. There wasn't anybody to pay for it. So Little Rock actually jumped in and said, hey, we could buy a pipe making company cheap, pipe making machinery quick. And they actually shipped the whole plant to Little Rock. They made the pipe, they disassembled it, they sold it off as scrap. Okay? So now we have to have couplings made whenever we have, that pipe is a tank. I mean, it is, the engineers just say, that pipe, we don't, that's not wood. We don't break that pipe. I mean, it's a tank, but anyway, so we have 39-inch pipe. That's the only place in the system we have 39-inch pipe, and it runs from Winona to Hill Road. Park Hill wanted to buy water from North Little Rock. Remember that they had a deal that they were going to have to sell all the water for 4 cents to Arkansas Water Company that was providing North Little Rock. Well, the city of Little Rock actually went and sued Arkansas Water Company and said, you can't sell water to Park Hill. Now this gets it back into where now we're getting into the mentality of water controls growth. Don't give them water, they won't come, they can't do anything, okay? We already talked about Jackson Reservoir. They announced that we had the softest water, 38 that flows. If you use more water, and this is where we're getting into, this would never fly today. If you use more water this year than you used last year, the additional you can buy at half price. So then the next year you got to, you've raised the bar and it's still on that high foot price. So, and they were actually going around to this. They were average advertisements, 38, and it says, we've got this deal for you. If you will put in an underground sprinkler system, we've made a deal with some contractors that they will come and put in the system to water your yard for $95, and you can pay it out over time on your water bill. Because they want people to use more water. We now have all this water out in the lake. We need you to now use it. And the way we get usage is watering lawns. So, it'll make our city more beautiful. It'll make your house more beautiful. And they consistently ran ads. And you see these ads are being paid for down here by the Little Rock Municipal Water Works. If I tried to run that ad today, I'd have 50 protesters in the conference room at the next board meeting saying, what are you doing? And then the first manager was named Leslie A. Jackson. He was the first manager appointed after the treatment plant was built, and that's why Jackson Reservoir. They didn't name it that until later. It was just called the Auxiliary Reservoir for a long time, but then it was later named the Jackson Reservoir. And so that's that. So that gets us down the front of the road. We used to, our water quality was so bad. There were, did I take you everywhere? That's great. Our water quality was so bad that there were companies that actually made a living and were made profitable because they took the water and then they poured it through sand filters, and they didn't bottle it. We'll talk about bottled water later. But they didn't bottle it, but then they would bring it, it was the original. Anybody remember when it got popular to buy the big 5-gallon jugs and you put them on the little dispenser? That's what they did, and that's what they did for households. And so they actually put these people out of business. It was like, hey, wait a minute, I've been in this business for 30 years, and you're going to go provide clean, safe, affordable water out of the pipes, and it's going to put me out of business. Even in 1939, they said, why do we have a separate sewer board and a water board? And there was a big push to merge the two boards. Everybody that sat on the sewer board, because they knew where things were going, objected strenuously, and so that it died. And we're not bringing this back either, but I thought that was kind of cool. 4 times a week in different places around the city, the water company, in connection with the Parks and Recs department, would go and open up the fire hydrants so the kids could come play in the street and play with it, so they'd have a way to cool off. It's the original splash pad. Yes. Okay? So they did that, and that was a service that they provided. So, remember I told you about the 4 cents per gallon? Little Rock figured out that it's actually costing us about 8 cents per 1,000 gallons to make that water, to treat it and take care of it and provide the treatment plant operators. And so that it is below the cost of production, okay? So they raised the rates to 9 cents. Arkansas Water Company sued them and said, you can't do that. We have a contract. It says you will sell us our water for 4 cents per 1,000 gallons. You should pay us the 4 cents, because we considered that as part of our price when we sold all the assets. If we didn't think we were going to get water at 4 cents, we would have required a higher price when you bought all the assets. Arkansas Supreme Court, by the way, who mostly lived on the south side of the river, and that's where their offices are, said, no, you lose. You cannot require one governmental entity to subsidize. It's not fair to have them subsidize. What really set North Little Rock off, and what really disappointed and what caused problems later, is they raised the rates to 9 cents per 1,000, and they said, oh, by the way, Little Rock residents, now that we have all this water money coming in from the north side of the river, we can lower your rates. So they raised the rates on the north side of the river, and they lowered the rates on the south side of the river, and nobody was happy, all right? Except for maybe a few. But I say that because it sets up what happens later. All right, so you would think during the war that there just wouldn't be a lot going on and what have you. And what we had was the Great Water Row. And it was all about Mr. Boone, who had been serving on the Water Commission. In fact, he was actually chair of the Water Commission. When his term ended, could he be reappointed? Nobody knew. We haven't had this before. This is a new issue. There was only 3 people on the water board. The other two people on the board said, no, we're not going to reappoint you. Well, he sued. It all got crazy. The realtors got involved. The city council got involved. It got so nasty that even when they went to other city leaders and said, would you serve? They said, no, I'm not getting into that mess. That's mess. It's not worth it. All right? So finally they get that resolved. This is kind of neat. In 1950, Little Rock started putting fluoride in the water. Don't know if you're in favor or against it. If you're in favor of it, it really helps your teeth as a kid. All right, that kind of stuff. But they started putting fluoride in the water. They were the first city in the state of Arkansas to start adding fluoride to water. We still have fluoride in water today. It's endorsed by the American Dental Society. They actually say it improves teeth, not gives us more cavities. That would be more money. So I think they're saying, and it has nothing to do with the UN trying to track us around the world. UN didn't exist in 1950. But you see, actually, in 1953. There's already discussion that, remember, we said in 1937, 38, we're going to have enough water for the next 75 years. That's what the headlines read. And by 1953 and 54, we are already seeing cartoons about future demand for water and present water supply. We don't have enough water supply out of the book. Those are fake. And people are already talking about, let's build Lake Maumelle. We did get this fancy sign that they're all pretty excited about. The health department actually started telling cities, your water's approved. And so you wanted the approval of the health department, because there were a lot of cities that did not have that sign. So that was a big deal, that your city that your city's water was approved by the state health department. 54, we're at an all-time low. We have the moisture control expert. As he was dubbed by the Arkansas Gazette, he says, if you hire me, pay me $1,700, I will fill your lake. So you will no longer have it. The Democrat just said he was a rainmaker. Maybe that's, I don't know. But he said he wanted $1,700. He was not hired. That said, if you know about the tank at Pierce up in the Heights, the tank at Pierce and whatever, the city said, no, you can't have it. See, well, water said, okay, then nobody west of here gets any water. So it was eventually approved, but it was at one point they owned that whole half block because they were going to put a big tank up there. Now they own a quarter of the block and they have a smaller tank, but it's still up there. We made it pretty this year if you go look at it. Again, we're 54, we're water rationing. We're put on a list with 9 other counties of water things. And this is where we really see politics enter into for the first time, okay? The city, Little Rock Waterworks Commission, by the way, there was this love-hate relationship between the Little Rock Water Commission and the City of Little Rock City Council that went on from the time it was created to last year. But the Little Rock Municipal Waterworks Commission said, we need to build a lake, and if we're going to build a lake, we need to issue debt to sell bonds, and under state law, you have to get the city's approval to raise the rates and to sell the bonds. And the city electors, remember, commissioners are appointed, directors are elected. The director said, no, we won't get re-election if we raise rates and sell the bonds. So we're not doing it. State legislature said, wait a minute. This is where all the state and government offices are. This is where everything's going on. Little Rock, if you won't approve, because we want water in the Capitol, we want water in the governor's mansion, what have you. If you won't approve the new bonds to be issued and the rates to be able to pay those bonds off, we will take your oversight of the Little Rock Municipal Waterworks away. No longer appoint the commissioners, no longer approve rates, no longer approve the issuance of debt, what have you. Little Rock said, I don't care. We're not passing it. It's our thing. It's our water. You don't have any control. So the Senate actually passed a bill that would have removed the Little Rock Water Works from under the umbrella of the city of Little Rock and made it totally autonomous. Okay? That bill passed on the 3rd. On the 9th, they approved the rates and they approved the issuance of the bonds, and it never got considered on the House floor. Okay? So that kind of went away. There was, because the bond is a rate ordinance, the bond issuance is an ordinance and the rate going up is a rate ordinance, there was a referendum that was called, voters went out and got signatures, said you can't do this, and they said, we're gonna have an election, so they put it on the ballot. And there was a huge advertising campaign that everybody was involved in about voters, you really need to approve this, because if you don't approve the building of Lake Maumelle and the additional rates to be able to pay for it, the bonds to be able to build it, our city is not gonna grow. There's just not enough money. In fact, we'll lose population, we'll lose businesses, we'll do. And so on November the 12th, the Little Rock passed overwhelmingly approved the issuance of the bonds and the raising of the rates to build Lake Maumelle. At the same time, they approved parking meters for the first time. So they actually elected higher rates and parking meters, two taxes at once, kind of sort of. So that happened in 55. So then we start building Lake Maumelle. That's not the building, that comes later. But this is the intake site that was originally built out at Lake Maumelle. They built a huge dam. But this kind of shows you kind of the scale. It was the largest man-made lake in the state at the time. It's been surpassed now, but it was a big lake. And they put people out there on the lake to patrol it. And I love that they're in the little pith helmets and what have you to keep people from out of it. So I'm going to digress a little bit. And so even when Winona was built, there was this push by the population to say, we want to water ski, we want to be in the lake, we're paying for it with our rates, we want to use it. And the commission said, nope, water's too pure, we don't want the pollutants in it, and what have you. Doug found today, or just a little bit earlier, while the lake was filling up, there were people out water skiing in Lake Maumelle, and they were out swimming in it, but it wasn't being used as water supply yet. I guess it's kind of a thing because it was still filling up. But again, that same debate resurfaced when Lake Maumelle was built, and initially it was no contact. Initially, it would have been a big black fence put around the whole thing, and there would be no activity on Lake Maumelle. There was a compromise reached in the very late 50s that said, okay, we'll allow fishing, but they don't even, at that point, they didn't even allow bank fishing because they didn't think they could control the litter and what have you as well. But now we have the limited use that we have on now, fishing and sailing and those types of things. But we get, Jim Bryan probably is responsible for this, we get people that they want permits to be able to land their seaplanes on the lake. John Thomas, yeah. You're right. But we don't allow people to land their seaplanes on it. But there's continuous requests for additional recreation. I will add the plug that if we allowed it, first of all, I don't think you'd be able to water ski on it anyway because the boats would be so tight that you would, and we would be in Lake Hamilton. And if you've ever been in Lake Hamilton, that's not what we want as our drinking water supply. Part of what makes our water as good as it is we start with a really fresh, really good product. All right, so we've done the pith plants. Beautiful Lake Maumelle. Now it was built. Now we're going to fly through time. Okay, Lake Maumelle was built. It provides could provide about 150 million gallons of water a day. We don't take that much out of it because we use as much as we can out of Ozark than we can. But it's going to be able to provide us for a while. Wilson Treatment Plant was built at the same time Lake Maumelle was built. It was originally much smaller. This wing of the plant down here didn't exist, and it only had these 8 settling basins, but it's been expanded in time. There's 2 underground storage tanks here and here. This is the one that you see if you're on 430 driving south. It's there on the right-hand side of the road there at Pleasant Valley where it comes under. And that's the Wilson Treatment Plant, named after Jack Wilson, who was another former director of the water system. So it was built in 1990. Well, you gotta go back. They were going to build Lake DeGray. Everybody know where Lake DeGray is? They were going to use a federal project. They were going to build Lake DeGray, and they were looking to build it, and they had to cost justify it to Congress to be able to build it. And so they ran all the things that said, well, it's going to generate electrical power. There's so much recreational value, and they couldn't get the value realized from the lake high enough to justify the cost to build it. So the very last thing they did to get it approved is they added municipal and industrial water to the use of the lake. And so they built the lake. They finished it in about 1986, okay? They formed a new, I'm drawing a blank, they formed a new water entity. Doesn't matter. They formed a new water entity to control who used the municipal and industrial use out of it, okay? Has 152 million gallons of water a day that can be used out of it. Kimsey, a little water utility down in that area, rural water utility in that area, signed on, and they originally signed on, okay, we'll take 2 million of that 150 million gallons. And the federal government said, okay, entity, you need to go sell the other 150 million gallons of water. Well, we've come forward from 1986 to 1997, and 87, I've got my dates mixed up. Sorry, I got to back up another 10 years. 1987, and the feds come and say, water entity, you have not sold the 150 million gallons of water that's available, so we haven't been paid back for the cost of building this lake. We're going to take it away from you unless you do something with it. Okay?